Okay, this is Philip Dorian at Magic Jesus. I'm going to begin taking St. Peter and showing how he relates to Jupiter. Just take St. Paul and show how he relates to Apollo and to even older gods. Scholars have largely remained deaf and blind to the obvious parallels between Peter and Paul and Jupiter and Apollo. But Zeus Jupiter is father or pater, and that's his name is Diauspiter, the sky father, or day sky father, we might say. And he is represented as Petrus, the rock. Apollo is based on Apul, or Aplu, which both mean the sun, the male heir, as with Ninurta's epithet, Aplu Enlil, son of Enlil. Thus, Judaism symbolizes the religion of the Father, and Petrus, Peter the Rock, is the evangelist to the Jews. And Christianity, the pagan cult, which is Roman through and through, is the religion of the Son, Aplu, with evangelist Paulus, who is likewise a pun on Pella, as well as Aplu, which means stone. Aplu is a well-known deity of the Hittites, cognate with Apollo, or Apollonius, the defender god of Troy that we all know from Homer, or not from Homer, but it comes from an earlier source, a treaty, Alexander of Wilusa. And you're going to find that Alexander is a mythology that runs all the way back to the Mesopotamians, but you have to see how the names get changed to grasp that. Anyway, the stick and ball, or Miku and Puku of Mesopotamian myth, can be seen as the tree and the fruit, and can also be seen as the things that you play polo with. And Gilgamesh is, of course, King Gilgamesh, so he wears his men out playing such games because it keeps them fit. I want to read a little bit. The denizens of the tree, once it has been planted in the goddess Inanna's garden, are also important for us to consider. The Anzu, or Imdugud bird, in the branches or crown of the tree, is a storm cloud monster. He was closely associated with the south wind, as was his adversary, the storm god Ninurta. Lilitu, who took up residence in the trunk of the tree, is related to the word lil, wind, breeze. It could be construed spirit, I think, as well, with a secondary meaning of ghost. We know her principally from later Jewish tradition as Lilith. She here stands for the sky or air between the earth and the storm cloud. The snake at the roots of the tree is probably the Euphrates River, which had carried off the Halupu tree prior to its being taken to Inanna's garden. If so, then, we are dealing with a cosmic tree, with the storm cloud in its branches, the region of wind and rain in its trunk, and the river at its root. In other words, we have here a marvelous cosmogram that nicely depicts the water cycle in nature. The miku, or stick, is made from the crown of the tree, i.e., from the branches where the Imdugud bird of the south wind was nesting. The puku, or ball, is made from the root of the tree, where the snake/river resided. We will recall that Enki's boat is being assailed by the storm and the flood tide, and this action is intended by the bombardment of hailstones. Okay, now they're going to get into a little bit about the Euphrates here, which I identify with Jupiter. Jupiter and Euphrates fit together essentially because they sound like one another enough. So he ended up with this pater. You're able to put father in there. Well, that's great. Religion uses familial language, even amongst cult members, referring to people as brothers in the Lord and this sort of stuff. So the river Euphrates is the piercer, the serpent. The noble father, Eupater. The serpent gnaws the roots of the tree. That's the water nourishing the tree. Alexander is like Gilgamesh, the son of a god. Jupiter seduced Olympias, named for a sacred mountain like Ninhursag in the Mesopotamian myth, in the form of a serpent. Okay, so Zeus is a serpent. He seduces Olympias. And this is classic for these world tree myths. There is a mountain, it's got a tree on it, or it could be an island, would have the same effect. And a serpent is guarding the tree. The Greeks have this at the Hesperides, and the three fates are found there, and Atlas is found there. Alexander is like Gilgamesh, the son of a god. The word Pella derives from two languages. In Greek, it means stone. In Hebrew, it has two meanings: city of refuge and marvel of God. Pella was the name of the settlement where Alexander the Great was born. Hebrews see this as a place of refuge, and I have a little blurb on that. But let me point out a little known fact about Josephus. Jupiter is Josephus, okay, and he is captured at Yadfat, which he calls Yatapata. Josephus says he's captured at Yatapata, which means he's breaking his neck, not to say Jupiter. Okay, so Christians flee to Pella. Josephus also hides in Pella, rock or stone. Petrus, Jupiter, is also a rock. The rock Kronos spit out, and it landed at Delphi, but he thought it was Jupiter, you see, so there's a little pun going on in the Greek myth over the regurgitated rock and Zeus himself, because the Jupiter's mother had disguised him or had given Kronos a rock to swallow. Now, Kronos, or Cronus, is time as well. He had come to be regarded as Father Time in later myth. And so when time swallows its own children, that's what happens every year. Okay, 6 months get swallowed, but another 6 months get spit out. And there were the 6 Olympians that Zeus had swallowed. So this is a time allegory. If you can get it. If you can't, well, then you can't. It landed at Delphi when Kronos regurgitated it. Jupiter is the serpent, as is evinced in the myth of Alexander's conception from his mother, Olympias, and his father, Zeus Jupiter. We get Petrus and Pella as parallel names to Jupiter and Apollo, and Peter and Paul. Now, Olympias and Alexander tried to substitute Alexander as the groom in a wedding and alienating Philip. A marriage was eventually arranged between Cleopatra, daughter of Olympias, and Philip, to a brother of Olympias. At that wedding, Philip was assassinated. That's Alexander's dad, Philip II. Olympias and Alexander were rumored to have been behind her husband's murder, though whether this is true or not is disputed. We'll find this thing I just read matching the serpent seed myth of Eden, which suggests that Cain, who slew Abel, was actually the son of the serpent and not of Adam. So here we have Olympias and Alexander, the son, again, Alexander, being rumored to be behind the murder. Even the next wife glorifies the father, the next wife being Cleopatra, glory of the father. Note, Inanna glorifies Anu, Enki, and Enlil, her 3 fathers, as they are called. Now, we know the identity of Penelopeia is, as I have long said, the pen ball, or face of God. That God has to be Odysseus then. And so she reflects the face of her God, much as Jacob wrestling the angel at Peniel has two faces involved, one reflecting the face of the other. Well, who's his brother? Esau. Okay, so now is the angel a a heavenly version of Esau or something? Well, it kind of seems that way, but what I think it is Esau was the one who was essentially Yahweh, okay, in his glory. He's the rising sun, and he wears the coat of the King of Heaven. He wears the goat skin, just as Zeus does, just as Hermes does, and Athena does sometimes too. So these things are good to know. That is a shamanic coat. It has a celestial aspect, that of symbolizing the clouds. And these clouds, of course, are integral to the sedentary agricultural communities that created the civilization that we now enjoy. But when the first cities were being made, it was really hard on people to give up the free tribal life where everybody was pretty much, equal, and then start fitting themselves into the hierarchical cities where you could, if you ran afoul of the law, you could end up dead. I mean, you just had to watch out. You didn't mess with the royals. And the royals, of course, lorded it over the people, but they had a job to do. So I can even kind of see their point. The Puku and Miku in Gilgamesh, those two objects. So this is the polis and the Balis. Okay, essentially. Now notice you've got Paulus there at the polis, and the Balis is, of course, Baal or Baal, which we're familiar with. And Apollo, he's a bridge between that. He's Apollonius. This also means Apul Ionis, in my humble opinion, and so it means son of Jonah. Simon Bar Jonah is a version of Apollo. It is a humanized version of him. I know what you're thinking. You're saying Peter equates to Apollo too? Apollonius is Simon Bar-Jonas, and we know that Jesus calls Peter Simon Bar-Jonas. Okay, well, the simplest explanation, and you'll find out that it actually is true, is that the Son is also the Father. Okay, on some level, the Son will always be equated with the Father. Jesus says, I and my Father are one. Okay, Yahweh says that he was known as El, this sort of thing. Okay, well, they're not misleading you. It's even the human gets identified to some extent with his creator. Though I'm not saying that the human is a god. Well, I think there's a place in the Bible where it says, ye are gods. Okay, so there were a lot of pantheistic ideas that were quite natural to the pagans. They could see God in anything and everything. They could worship the creation if they wanted to. That was not inherently evil. The Greeks are pantheistic, and when I start showing you who Pan is, you're going to see why. And is Pan God? Yeah, Pan's all the gods. Call this good for part 1, and go ahead and catch me with part 2 later on at Magic Jesus at youtube.com/c/Magic Jesus.